This is power and purpose personified, walking towards justice, fighting for freedom. This is speaking now, empowering the next generation to know how to live with confidence and precision, to move with mastery and meaning. This is a spirit that is free, traveling one coast to the next, escaping the comforts of home. This is finding new friends and exploring the warrior within to destinations amazing, to destinations unknown. This is what it means to keep pounding, to cheer for the home team without hesitation. This is love and life, success and sacrifice. This is Yolanda Trotman, and this is The Conversation.
Hello, everyone. Listen, it is so good to see you guys again.
Hello, everyone.
I am getting an echo, so hold tight for 1 second.
Hello, everyone.
I am getting an echo, so hold tight for 1 second.
Hello, everyone.
I am getting an echo, so hold tight for 1.
There we go. All right, everyone. We were having a little bit of a technical difficulty. We are back live. It is so good to see you guys. My name is Yolanda Trotman, and welcome to The Conversation. We have an incredible show lined up for you, and we are going to be talking about the things that truly matter. Why this election is so important, what is at stake, and everything that we need to know in order to be prepared for this upcoming election cycle. So for those of you who are just joining us, it's really good to be back in this seat. It has been a while. We haven't had a show since June. And for a lot of reasons, was just planning on taking the rest of the year off to do some revamping and rebranding. But listen, could not do that this time because this midterm election, I say this, and it is not hyperbole. This midterm election is probably one of the most important midterm elections of our lifetime. And I don't say that loosely, because not only is democracy on the ballot, our judiciary is at stake. In terms of North Carolina, for those of you who are watching from North Carolina, it is going to impact what happens as far as what our state house and our state senate looks like. What that means if we end up having a supermajority again, which we've had before in the past. It's about the economy. It's about reproductive rights. It's about so many of those things. And this is not an election that you can afford to sit out on. So welcome to The Conversation. As I said, I'm so glad to see you guys. It's been way too long. So if you have not already done so, make sure before you leave the page for tonight, whether you're joining us live on Facebook or YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow us on IG, and like the Facebook page, all at The Convo Pod Show. If you've not already done so, make sure you also slide over to YouTube and look up The Conversation with Yolanda Trotman, and make sure that you click the bell and that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. So tonight, what we are talking about is what is at stake. I cannot stress that enough. What is at stake in terms of this midterm election? So for those of you sexy people who are joining us, the sexy people who have already voted, you can go ahead and make sure that you can sit back and relax and make sure that you share this with other people that you know who have not voted. Now, those of you who are not yet sexy, you have until November 5th to early vote here in Mecklenburg County and around the state if you're joining us from North Carolina. Because there's early voting locations in every single county that run through Saturday. And of course, election day is November 8th. So for those of you joining us, I see you, Cameron. For those sexy people who've already voted, if you can take a moment and put a heart or a check mark in the comments so that we know that you are already on it. If you have not yet voted, we're going to tell you everything that you need to know, particularly if you're in Mecklenburg County, in terms of where you need to go for early voting locations, how you find out the results on election night, how to do it the right way and not have a heart attack. I'll get to that. And as well as what you need to do to prepare to make sure that you're helping other people to go and vote, to be able to work the polls if you have time, to be able to support candidates that are obviously out there working to make change, because this election is too serious for you not to sit out. So welcome to the conversation. I see you, Sherlyn. I see you, Netta. Again, all you sexy people who have already voted, make sure you drop a heart or a check mark. Those of you who are not yet sexy, we're going to work on that. We're going to work on that so that you will be in sexy status before the end of this week. So I am so excited to have as my co-host tonight one of my favorite people in politics, and I don't say that lightly as well. You've seen him on the show before. We've done actually 2 shows in the past, in 2020 and I believe in 2021, when we were talking about the impact of state politics in particular. I first met him as an attorney here in Charlotte when he was and still is at the Public Defender's Office. No, actually, he was with Council for Children's Rights at the time before he came to the Public Defender's Office. I had the pleasure of working with him as an attorney, had the pleasure of him appearing in front of me when I was on the bench, has always represented his clients with a sense of advocacy, that true zealous advocacy that is truly special. He is a graduate of North Mecklenburg High School, a school where I once taught back in the day. He and I are also 49ers, proud graduates of UNC Charlotte. Go 49ers. And he is an Eagle, having graduated from North Carolina Central School of Law and received his JD from there. He is your North Carolina State Senator from District 38. I will disclose that he is on the ballot. His seat is up, but he is most certainly one of my most favorite people, my favorite persons to talk to about politics, because there's so much that we have to cover tonight. We are going to be talking about the impact on statewide politics. We're not going to really get down to the local level, and then we're going to talk about things on the national level. So make sure that you share this post now, and of course, share the replay when we're done. Sexy people chime in. All right, y'all, welcome to the show. None other than my friend, Senator Mujtaba Mohammed. How are you, sir?
Good evening, Yolanda. Thanks for having me on the conversation. It's great to be here with you and your wonderful listeners and guests.
Well, good evening, Yolanda. So how are things with you? So let's start with some of the big hot button issues in terms of what we need to address on the statewide level. So let's start with some of the big hot button issues in terms of what we need to address on the statewide level. So let's start with some of the big. Are you getting some feedback?
Yeah, I'm getting echo.
What is going on? Y'all hold tight for a second. Are you getting some feedback?
Yeah, I'm getting echo.
Hold on. Is that better?
Hi.
I think we're better now. You good?
Good.
You can hear me. I'm not hearing an echo either.
Better?
Oh, now again.
I think we're better now. You
Okay,
good?
let's figure out.
You can hear me.
going
I'm not
on.
hearing an echo either. Better?
Oh, now again.
Okay.
I think we're better now. You
Okay,
good?
let's figure
You
out.
can hear me. I'm not hearing an echo either. Better?
For those who are listening live, are you hearing an echo? Because I don't think it sounds like we're getting it on that side.
Are listening live? Are you hearing an echo?
Okay.
Because I don't think it sounds like we're getting it on that side. Are listening live?
All right, y'all, sit tight. We're going to exit and we're going to come right back in, because I don't know why StreamYard is tripping tonight. Hold tight.
All right, y'all, sit tight. We're going to exit and we're going to
All right, y'all, let's try this one more time. So for those of you who are tuning in live, let me know, because I'm not hearing the echo, but let me know if you're hearing an echo, because we're going to try this. I'm not sure why we were getting some feedback. So let's just do this again. So, all right, Senator Mohammed, we are back now. I'm not hearing an echo. Test your mic.
I'm not hearing an echo.
Okay, I think we're good.
Yes.
Okay, we're good. All right. I don't know what was going on, but we got too much to cover tonight. Some little gremlin in the computer to be acting up. Okay, so we're back. We're good. All right. So let me go back for those of you who didn't catch us at the top before we had to pop off and pop back in. So as I was saying, Senator Mohammed is a North Carolina State Senator here, District 38. He is, in full disclosure, on your ballot for those of you who are in District 38. He is, like I said, my go-to person whenever we need to talk about politics, in particular on the statewide level. And then, of course, we're going to talk about this also on the national level. And in particular, as it relates to what we have to keep in mind with some key seats, some key races that we need to keep our eyes on statewide, because it's going to make a difference, not only what happens in Raleigh as far as our House and our Senate, but more importantly, what happens in terms of our judiciary, because I cannot stress enough how our entire judiciary is at stake, period, statewide. So how are you this evening? I think we're good now. No echoes. Gremlins are gone.
I'm doing great. It's great to be here in front of you, Judge Trotman, Attorney Trotman.
Always a pleasure.
Amazing,
always a pleasure.
educative citizen who's empowering our wonderful listeners and voters out there to understand why it's so critical these next 6 days before Election Day now.
Yes, we are 6 days out, and we have got to get this done. We have got to toe the line, and we've got to make sure that we have the numbers that we need so that we don't regress back to what we had before. So let's first talk about, just in general, for people who don't know, the general makeup now as it relates to our state house and our state senate, and what the trend is or what the possibility is in terms of how a supermajority could affect just politics in general in North Carolina.
Sure. Well, what I'll start by saying first, Yolanda, is I think, and this is what viewers need to understand. I think this is the problem that we have in America right now, is that we think that this specific election is the most important all the time. The reality is every single election is critical. This is an opportunity for you, the citizens, to participate in making sure that you have a representative democracy of people that look like you, who represent you, who have the same interests as you. And I think the problem is when registered voters decide not to vote or not register to vote, for example, that's when democracy dies. And right now, Yolanda, we got 6 days before Election Day. Last day to early vote is in North Carolina, November 5th. We have a real opportunity to make sure we move forward. Are we going to move backwards, or are we going to move forward as a country? And we've got a lot of critical races. Everything from the U.S. Senate, from where I sit in the North Carolina Senate, I can tell you, I think the most critical races right now, obviously, you got that razor-thin majority that the Democrats have in the U.S. Senate with Sherry Beasley. You got a state Supreme Court race that I'm going to talk about, I'm sure, later. And one of the most critical races is where I serve, in the North Carolina General Assembly, because folks need to understand, across state legislatures, there is this been peddling since 2020, this big lie, where folks are working day and night and day to essentially destroy our democracy in state legislatures. And North Carolina is no different. Yolanda, we had actually a number of bills in the General Assembly in North Carolina, which would have created voter suppression essentially. And just to kind of tell you the makeup, because you asked about it currently, right now, in 2018, you, the people, because of your belief in justice, equity, and our state's well-being, after almost a decade, you helped end a Republican supermajority in 2018. Now, because of redistricting after every 10 years, all the litigation that we have new maps. Well, the Republican majority in the General Assembly is working hard again because they are tired of a man named Roy Cooper, who's our governor, because we have a divided government currently in our state. We've got a Democratic governor, you got the Republican General Assembly, and currently you've got 28 Republicans in the North Carolina Senate. You got 22 Democrats. That makes 50 state senators. You got 69 Republicans in the state house, and you got 51 Democrats in the state house. So what do they need to get rid of Governor Cooper's veto. In the North Carolina Senate, Yolanda, they're going to need only 2 seats. 2 seats to bring their supermajority back, and they need 3 seats in the North Carolina State House to bring their supermajority back. And a lot of folks are anxious out there. The pundits, the people that are analyzing these maps. The reality is Republicans do have an opportunity to potentially gain a supermajority. That means no checks on this General Assembly if that were to happen, except our courts.
Right.
And that's another issue.
And I think people need to understand that when a supermajority, they get that number that gives them the 3/5 majority to be able to override any veto. So the check, at least when Roy Cooper was first in his first 2 years, it was he was still struggling with the supermajority initially being able to override his veto. Now, obviously, since that's not been the case in the last several years, he hasn't. I don't think there's been one. I looked before we came on tonight that they ever had enough votes to be able to override his veto, but he's had to do it 47 times. Is it 47?
It was before I came to the North Carolina Senate and we got elected in 2018. The Republicans overrode the governor's veto almost 23 times since he got elected in 2016. 23 times. But since we've been in the North Carolina Senate, since the good people of Mecklenburg sent me and others as reinforcements, that number's been 0.
Right.
The governor has actually vetoed 75 dangerous pieces of legislation that could have potentially put public health authority at risk, environmental protections, women's reproductive freedoms at risk, voting rights at risk. All those bills have been vetoed by this governor and sustained time and time again by members in the North Carolina Senate and North Carolina General Assembly. So that's what's at stake in the General Assembly.
And so that's important for those of you who are just tuning in, is understanding that we're not talking about 10 or 15 seats that can change this back into a Republican supermajority. 2 in the Senate, 3 in the House. That's it. That's it. And these are in particularly competitive in competitive counties where the person who we need to maintain that seat may or may not be outspent, but we have to make sure that we have boots on the ground. I think some of the mistakes we made, and I'm not saying it's a mistake fundamentally, but because Mecklenburg County has been a blue county for so long, we think that as goes Mecklenburg, as goes the rest of the state. And that couldn't be further from the truth. The whole adage of the great state of Mecklenburg, that is an adage. But I just think because of what we're used to, and because Mecklenburg County is so fundamentally diverse as it relates to the other 99 counties, the assumption is that, frankly, sometimes the mindset's the same, and they don't see how the majority of the rural counties have such a tremendous impact on legislation, even from the budget down. I mean, we had teachers that got raises, but it's not outpacing the rate of inflation. Ask any teacher who's still struggling to try to make ends meet. But that wasn't a Democratic written budget. That was a Republican written budget. And I think people need to understand the impact of that. It is not about just basic votes on the floor. It's about being able to advance some of the most basic legislation, regardless if it's bipartisan support or not. For you, the one thing that I've admired about you since the time that you became a senator, and anybody that follows politics, you're not one of these senators who get senators or representatives, but senators specifically, that get in and don't do much. You see them around election time. I'm not throwing shade. I'm just keeping it real. That there's other senators, some of your colleagues who come in, but you go and look to see how many bills they've introduced. What have they sponsored? What have they co-sponsored? What have they done beyond just voting yay or nay? What have they actually done in terms of advancing legislation that is what the people of North Carolina actually need for their safety, for their safety, their security, their economic viability, for their children, for education. And anybody that goes to your site can see the wealth of legislation that you've introduced, whether we could get it past your colleagues or not. The fact that you've never given up on the things that matter, I totally and completely respect that.
Well, this is what folks need to understand about the General Assembly, and this is what's so frustrating, Yolanda, is that a lot of great ideas, they're not partisan. They're not Republican ideas. They're not Democratic ideas. They're just good policy.
Right.
And the reality is partisan politics gets ahead of these issues. And the reality is when a Democrat files a bill in the North Carolina General Assembly, majority of the time that bill, forget a floor vote or a floor hearing, it doesn't even get a committee hearing. And that's a huge disservice to all people in North Carolina, because I personally believe that both Republicans and Democrats, they have great ideas, and that's what good governance is. coming together, bridging that divide, rolling up our sleeves and working on public policy. But I'm proud, like you mentioned, I've been one of the few members of the Democratic Party who has been able to be effective in the North Carolina General Assembly. We've been able to pass a number of bills related to police accountability, looking at reducing co-pays when it comes to free lunches for our children, school psychologists, a number of critical pieces. But I think there's much more work to be done, which is why these state legislative races are so critical. And Yolanda, one last thing I'll bring up about the General Assembly. You brought up the importance of Mecklenburg County, for example, this urban-rural divide potentially across our state. But the reality is, if we're going to get a Democratic majority, then yeah, we've got to pick up some seats in rural North Carolina. But right now, actually, the urban areas, the suburban areas in Wake County and Mecklenburg County, they're actually the path for the Republicans to get that supermajority. So this is a clear opportunity for people that live in Mecklenburg County. We've got districts in South Charlotte where Rachel Hunt is running. We've got a district in the Huntersville area, North Mecklenburg, where Christy Clark's running, both Democrats. She's in the state house. Rachel Hunt's going to be running the state Senate seat. And then we got great seats in Wake County as well. Again, suburban areas that are going to be critical for the Republicans to pick up a Republican supermajority. So if Democrats get out there, outperform, we do what we need to do with the support of unaffiliated voters, then I think we can have some checks and balances in our state. And I think most North Carolinians want that.
And so let's talk for a second about the judiciary. And we'll start with the state Supreme Court, in particular the two races that we're keeping an eye on, which is, of course, the main candidate, Democratic candidates, Justice Ervin and Justice Inman, in two hotly contested statewide races. I'm going to preface this by saying, because for those of you who have been voters for quite some time, judicial races have been partisan for decades. And when I ran in 2014, it was nonpartisan. And so it didn't say whether you were a Democrat or a Republican. If you were asked, and that oftentimes happened during campaigns, well, what are you, or a D or an R? Your answer would generally be it's nonpartisan, because you don't want the idea is that you want judges who are going to make decisions based on the law and not based on party lines, not based on party politics. But that particular election year was interesting because in Mecklenburg County and other counties, there were a number of judges of color and women in particular who beat out white male incumbents that year. Sure. And it wasn't until in 2016 specifically that the judicial districts, and only in a few counties, most specifically concentrated in Mecklenburg, there where it used to be a countywide race, then it became redistricted in such a way where certain candidates, it made it impossible for them to be able to win where they live. So it was either pick up and move somewhere else to another district, or they face losing their seat. Could spend a whole show on that when we had Judge Best on, because they literally wrote her out of her seat and she had to sue along with Judge Brooks and Judge Curitan, who were those three parties. And eventually we got it back to a countywide race, sort of. But we still have various seats that some people can, we'll get to that in Superior Court races. But the point is that it was nonpartisan for many, many years. And because of the results of having a Republican supermajority, to be able to come in there and change the districts and really go after those counties where you had that shift politically, it makes a difference. So that said, let's go back to Supreme Court specifically, and then we'll go back up to the top of the ticket. But as we were talking offline before we came online, I think people really need to understand why these two races are crucial, because of what the current makeup is and what it could look like for us as that major check to, even if we have a Republican supermajority, if we have a judiciary that is also now majority Republican, what that's going to look like for protecting voting rights, for protecting against gerrymandering, and a number of other things that we have to see beyond just the D and the R.
Look, Yolanda, you've been a former district court judge. We're both attorneys. I think we understand the importance of having an independent judiciary that's fair and impartial, and judges that are experienced and understand the law. I think that's what all people want. The reality is the battle for the state Supreme Court began a number of years ago. Like you said, the races used to be nonpartisan for judges, as they should be, because there shouldn't be partisan politics involved in electing judges who understand fairness, justice, understand the law, understand constitutional values and principles. But the reality is a guy named Mike Morgan, a black Democrat, got elected to the North Carolina Supreme Court. Well, that turned on a light bulb from members in the North Carolina General Assembly, this being the Republicans. And they said, no way, we cannot have that. So they quickly proceeded to make judicial races partisan races, hoping that Republicans would go support as many Republican judges as they could, and they could quickly get rid of a Democratic majority on the state Supreme Court. And currently, as we have it, Yolanda, the Democrats have a 4-3 majority on the state Supreme Court. You got two races, seat 3 and seat 5, currently up. That's Justice Ervin, who's one of the current incumbents, and Judge Lucy Inman, who currently sits on the Court of Appeals, who's running to ascend to the state Supreme Court. These are going to be critical races. Folks, if you're out there, you understand what happened over the summer. You had over 50 years of precedent under Roe v. Wade, which essentially protected women's reproductive freedom at the United States Supreme Court. Well, we told multiple generations what was given to you can and will be taken away from you after that U.S. Supreme Court decision. That means the state Supreme Court right now is ground zero. And that's where you're seeing tons of dark money. You're seeing tons of special interests dumping in loads and loads of money into this race to make sure that they defeat Justice Ervin and they defeat Lucy Inman on the Court of Appeals. For me, my biggest concern and fear is the impact that this is going to have on elections for decades and generations to come. Because, folks, you need to understand that it has only been our courts that have been able to stop the recklessness of this General Assembly time and time and time again, especially when it comes to redistricting, when it comes to voter ID, election laws. It's been our courts that have been our saving grace. So the Republicans have understood that because they've had control of the state assembly. So now they're like, all right, now it's time for us to take the courts. And that's what they're working towards, Yolanda, so they can gut voting rights, so they can gerrymander the heck out of our state even more to make sure that they have a super majority for essentially decades to come. That means right now, especially when it comes to reproductive freedoms, Speaker Moore, Senator Pro Tem Phil Berger, they've already talked about potentially pushing restrictive abortion bills. We've already seen, Yolanda, redistricting efforts, terrible gerrymandering going on in our state. I think I talked to you at the start of the show about Congress, for example. Redistricting happens every 10 years after the census. For far too long, our congressional districts have been gerrymandered. And right now, because of the courts, the state Supreme Court stepped in on partisan gerrymandering because the U.S. Supreme Court had punted on this issue and said that they wouldn't get involved. So using the state constitution, these plaintiffs were able to make an argument. The state Supreme Court sided with them. A special master drew these congressional maps. And now you essentially have a 7-7, maybe an 8-6 split leaning towards Republicans when it comes to congressional maps. But what the Republicans really want is potentially 11 seats for Republicans and maybe 2, maybe 3 for Democrats. And that's not a representative democracy for North Carolina. We're a purple state. That's what's at stake.
And I think that people need to understand, because oftentimes, because the judges are at the bottom of the ballot, and thankfully this ballot isn't as long as the last one was. And so there's less of an issue of voter fatigue. But you have to be able to make sure that you get to that portion of the ballot, not just statewide, but also when we get to our local elections, particularly with the district court seats that are up, as well as our district and superior court seats that are up. Now, the Court of Appeals races are a little bit different because I think there's 4 or 5 seats that are up for the Court of Appeals. And that's important because I think a lot of people don't know the difference between the two. As far as the Court of Appeals, where decisions are made by a 3-judge panel, which could or could not go up before the Supreme Court. And that makeup makes a huge difference in terms of everything from criminal justice reform, business litigation, all of that, as far as the impact that means as far as the Court of Appeals. Explain just real briefly what those particular races look like and why we need to be particularly vigilant and making sure that we're protecting the Court of Appeals races as well.
Sure, there's a number of Court of Appeals races going on. I don't remember all the candidates off the top of my head. There's a number of them, but they're going to be on your ballot. And Yolanda, the other thing I forgot to tell you is the Republican General Assembly got rid of straight ticket voting as well.
Yep.
We talked about voter fatigue. So you can't go in there and say, hey, I'm going to vote straight Republican or state Democrat. You literally have to go through every single race Why? Because they're counting on you to get fatigued and be like, all right, I'm done with this ballot. Especially for folks who potentially vote curbside, you're filling out those bubbles because you've got some issues, maybe you got some health issues, things like that might not let you get into the voting booth. But look, Justice Beasley in 2020 lost the state Supreme Court seat by 401 votes. 401 votes. That was the margin of difference between Justice Newby and now our former Chief Justice Sherry Beasley. But no, there's a number of Court of Appeal races as well going on. I can't remember the candidates all off the top of my head, but like you talked about, a lot of these issues are criminal law related, business related, and you want to be able to have judges that are fair and competent. So I would urge folks, I know the League of Women Voters, there's so many different organizations that have information about these amazing judges and candidates. The North Carolina State Board of Elections has a voter guide that provides information about all the judicial candidates as well up and down the ballot. And then, of course, we've got our own Superior Court races and District Court races, a number of open seats right here in Mecklenburg County for District Court seats. We've got a couple of competitive seats for states for Superior Court with Judge Bess, Judge Donald Cureton, and other folks that are running for those streets. And again, those races, real quick, Yolanda, I don't know if you want me to talk, but same thing.
Sure.
Criminal law, civil litigation. Those are important critical issues that folks are dealing with every single day in and day out. Again, I don't think those races should be partisan, but unfortunately, all those races have become partisan. So folks should get out there, elect good judges to preserve our democracy for generations to come.
And I think you touch on a good point, in particular in the local races, because one of the things that we always talk about is that it's going to be a local judge, whether it's district court or superior court, that's going to affect your life, potentially your livelihood, before anybody on the Supreme Court, before anybody else. That's why your local races matter so much, especially from, and I would say particularly from the district court bench, because that's traffic court, that's family court, that's juvenile court, that's every single particular system that can affect a person's life. That judge can make the decision whether or not he or she's going to give you relief on a fine or a fee, or if that conviction could potentially make you lose your driver's license, or any number of things that can happen. What bail is set at in case that you or someone that is charged with a crime. Like, all of those things matter. And I think, unfortunately, those are the races that we tend to overlook. We don't put that much emphasis in, but those are the people who are going to affect your life, or somebody that is going to affect their life faster than anything else. What's interesting, I think, about the judicial races, what I think a lot of people don't know, is there were a number of open seats for a variety of reasons. So we have a number of races that were decided in the primary. So they're on your ballot, generally uncontested, in particular on the district court bench. And so you'll see a whole bunch of people when you get to the district court races in particular, but you're generally only going to see one candidate, because generally the races were typically won in the primary. The Superior Court judicial races, you will see that there's 26 A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. It used to be A, B, and C. So it's a little bit different now. But Superior Court, depending on where you live, you may not see any people that you may know. They may not be on your ballot at all, because it depends on what district that they're in. That was true for me today when I went to vote, because there's nobody where I live that would have been on my ballot. And so, again, it's so important that you don't overlook the judges, and that you take a moment to just go and just look to see what a person is about as well. Because their judicial philosophy is, I promise you, it's going to matter in terms of the decisions that they make. I promise you, it's going to matter on the decisions that they make of how it may affect people that in the short term and in the long term. So we're at the 8:30 mark. So for those of you who are just tuning in, make sure that you are sharing this. Make sure, if you haven't already done so, make sure you like, follow, and subscribe at all things at the Convo Pod Show. Sexy people, if you have not checked in yet, who have already voted, then you need to make sure that you check in and make sure you let us know that you have already voted early. And that if you have not voted early, that you have a plan to vote early, because oftentimes many of these elections are won during early voting. And I'm told it might rain on Tuesday. We don't have time for that. Get it done this week. You have until Saturday. I'm going to post, in particular, the blue ballot in the comments. You have 19 locations this year. I believe it's 19 locations. All early voting hours, Monday through Friday, are from 8 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. Saturday, you will have until from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. No excuse. If you need to update your registration, if you need to make changes to your registration, you can do it all in one place at any location that is close to you. That's the beauty of early voting. Of course, if you on election day, you can only vote in your precinct. Everything has to be up to date. So that's why early voting is where it's at.
You can make
So
a plan. You can make a plan at iwillvote.com.
You can make a plan at
all the information that Yolanda just gave you at iwillvote.com. Everything's there.
Everything is there. You can also get your sample ballot at MECBO, MECKBOE.org, which is MEC Board of Elections. You can go to MECDEM.org, and you can go to the state Board of Elections website, which is NC SBE is it .org or .gov? I think it's
.org.
Where you can also get your sample ballot so that you can take a look at it before you actually go in to vote, that you have all the details. So, okay, let's get to the other, a couple of other big issues, in particular, the economy. And let's kind of go to the top of the ticket now.
Yeah.
Obviously, the big race that everybody's looking at is the race with Ted Budd and Sherry Beasley. I know y'all are sick of text messages. and emails, but I'm telling you, this race, if she wins this race, it is at least now projected that the Democrats have a 90% chance of being able to keep the slim majority that we have. I kid you not. This race
very
slim.
Literally.
And it can be done.
Slimmer than 50-50 with the vice president breaking the tie.
Yes. And we have to make sure that we don't have, there is not an option. It is not an option. The thing that I was a little bit concerned today, because I was always like, okay, well, I'm going in. And I was like, damn it, there's a Green Party and a Libertarian candidate. And I was just like, crap, because you know what happens, that ends up splitting, that takes away Democratic votes. It always has. And I didn't know that. And no shade to any of those candidates, but we don't have time for that. We don't have time for that. We need this seat to be held by Justice Beasley. No shade.
Justice Beasley is a phenomenal job. I don't think she's got to worry about the Green Party candidate. She definitely doesn't have to worry about the Libertarian Party candidates. I think she's going to pick up Green Party folks. She's going to pick up Libertarian candidates. She's going to pick up definitely unaffiliated, because Ted Budd, who's part of the Big Lie crowd, who's part of a very aggressive anti-abortion bill. I mean, this is Ted Budd. So you have the opportunity of electing a true public servant. I mean, how many times do people get to elect a public servant, a dedicated public servant? I mean, Justice Beasley, a former public defender, district court judge, like over here, Yolanda Trotman, Court of Appeals, the first African-American woman on the state Supreme Court, who unfortunately lost re-election by 401 votes. She's won statewide before. She was actually the first, I think, Black woman to win statewide in North Carolina. She's done it before. I know she's going to do it again, but it all comes down to the folks listening out there who's going to get out there, roll up their sleeves, talk to their friends, talk to their neighbors, because we really got to protect that razor-thin majority. She can be the 51st senator from the North Carolina if you do your part.
Absolutely. And the reason why you're seeing so much money being funneled into it, because people know that this race is going to be incredibly close. So if you vote and you're sick of the text message, that's fine. Go tell somebody else, go drive somebody else to the polls, go out and volunteer. There's always a need for poll workers, especially on election day. But get the word out, because there's a reason why this particular seat matters. Seat always matters, but why there's so much attention being put on this seat. And while, yard signs don't vote, we get that, but you also have to be able to stave off these ridiculous attack ads. I wish we had time to go through some of the ridiculous ads that you're seeing with decisions that were rooted in the law. Like, it just blows my mind where they keep bringing up the same issues with the scared woman. Oh my God.
Where judges are being impartial, following the law.
Yeah, the whole, oh my God.
Upholding the Constitution.
Yeah, they sided with the predators, and they didn't have to say,
Republicans and Democrats to do as judges, do their job.
Because they sided because the law was not constitutional.
We don't want judges to be emotionally reactive. We want judges to follow the letter of the law. We want them to follow the Constitution. We want them to be fair, respectful, and treat everyone with dignity. And I think Justice Beasley did that as a Chief Justice. She did it throughout her life. And I believe that she's going to do a phenomenal job representing us in the United States Senate. And I really hope on November 8th, we can celebrate Justice Beasley as our new U.S. Senator. And we haven't had it since Kay Hagan, the last Democrat, to be in the U.S. Senate. So North Carolina has a real opportunity to finally send a woman to the United States Senate, a Black woman.
Yes. And I think, as Annetta said, the ads are just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it's constant. And the hope is that either that's going to create apathy and you're not going to want to come vote at all, or you're going to see enough of it that you believe it to be true without actually going and finding out what the truth is. And this has been the danger of dark money and political elections for the past decade. But again, another story for another day. So top of the ticket, the Sherry Beasley race. In Mecklenburg County specifically, we've got District 12, District 14, supporting Alma Adams, supporting Jeff Jackson. And I think those particular races are important because being able to hopefully get those seats will help protect what we hope will still be a Republican. Still protect what will be a Democratic majority in the U.S. Congress. Now, I think what I'm also fearful of is that people are seeing these polls and they may subconsciously make it become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So let's take a second to kind of talk about that, what you've been seeing in the polling trends versus what the reality is in terms of boots on the ground.
Look, I think, Yolanda, all the polls that I've been looking at for almost every competitive race that we have for Congress and in the United States Senate, all of them have been within the margin of error. I mean, we've got polls out there where Sherry Beasley's leading. We've got polls out there where Ted Budd's leading. But the lead can be only given by the voters when they show up that day. Polling's changed so much. Sometimes people don't answer their phones. They're polling now on the internet. They're trying to figure out how to poll on cell phones. So it's not exactly accurate, and we don't know. But what I can tell you is that voters are voting more than ever currently. I think in 2014, I saw numbers out there. Voter turnout in North Carolina was almost up in the 40%. In 2018, we're at 53%. And folks, the pundits and the analysts out there are talking about how potentially in 2022, since our last midterm election, we're looking at potentially in the high 50s, maybe in the 60% range. And you got to remember, just 2 years ago, almost 75% of registered voters in North Carolina voted in the presidential election. Midterms, generally, we drop people off because potentially, sadly, people think that we only vote every 4 years for president. But no, we've got elections every single year, actually. So I think there's a lot of energy on all sides, and the reality is unaffiliated voters are going to be making that determination at the end of the day, what's going to end up happening and which way North Carolina goes. And we're a purple state, so it's expected.
Absolutely. And thanks, Cameron, for putting that in the comments of iwillvote.com. And like I said, I'll post the blue ballot. And of course, if you haven't already gotten your sample ballot, you can do that at mecboe.org. Or at the State Bar of Election, the North Carolina State Board of Election website as well. All right, so let's jump down to, I don't want to spend too much time on local races because I don't want us to run out of time. And I do want to take a couple questions. If you have questions, drop them in the comments. But what do you see on a national level? Of course, all the polls say the economy, but what do you see one of the biggest issues we need to be concerned about as it relates to the economy, especially with the Fed just raising interest rates again, another 0.75%. Like, what are y'all doing? Like, what in the world? I know what you're trying to do to slow it down, but I mean, come on now. I mean, I think we're at the highest level in what we've been in the last 40 years in terms of a quick rate hike. I may be wrong on the number of years, but this number of increases in a shorter period of time, obviously to slow down the rate of inflation is also a little it's concerning because we're all feeling it. We're all feeling the pinch. And I think people are assuming that is going to be enough to turn the tide to make more people vote Republican. And let's be realistic. That happens in every midterm election. The party that's in power tends to lose seats. That's not unusual. But the issue that we have to make sure about that we are doing our parts to get those numbers up. So that's less likely a reality. But to my point, my original question, so what do you think on a national level is one of the most important things? Yeah, I'll give you two that we really need to be thinking about in terms of either dealing with the economy or whatever whatever other issue you think is crucial with this election cycle.
What I'll tell you is, look, first of all, I think the two issues are obviously going to be the economy. The economy is always a critical issue, I think, in every single election, right? President Clinton's campaign team talked about the economy's stupid. It's the economy's stupid.
Right.
And then right now, abortion, reproductive freedom. I think those are the two critical issues. When it comes to the economy, look, as an attorney that works in our justice system, as a state senator, as a father, right, working class family myself, talking to our friends, talking to our neighbors, the reality is people are hurting. That's just the truth. People are hurting not because of one particular party per se. The reality is, for far too long, America is becoming a country for those that have and those that don't, right? There's this huge gap, and the middle class is hurting, and we're not doing enough to support the middle class, and especially low-income families. Affordable housing is a huge issue in places like North Carolina. People can't afford a 2-bedroom home. Of course they can't afford gas. Of course they can't afford groceries and things like that at the grocery store. So the economy is always going to be an issue. But here's my answer to the Republicans, or my question: what are you offering? Because the reality is, the Biden administration, and under a Democratic majority in the U.S. Senate and the United States Congress, has been one of the most productive sessions in years. You had the American Rescue Plan that helped cut child poverty, passed with only Democratic support. You have had, for the first time ever, a bipartisan piece of legislation to help tackle issues of gun violence in our country for the first time ever. You've had the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act that is sending millions and millions of dollars to much needed communities to rebuild our roads and bridges. And then the Inflation Reduction Act, finally allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices, helping us with the costs of power and electricity and other things. So I would give President Biden a ton of credit for his leadership, and so many other folks, because the Republicans, their answer has been no. Every single Republican, Yolanda, voted against the Inflation Reduction Act. In the North Carolina Senate, where I serve, Democrats, I myself, have proposed bills to help reduce the sales tax, eliminate it when it comes to diapers, feminine hygiene products, baby food, and formula. And the Republicans said no. We, during the summer, tried to pass a bill to get some sort of rebate to every single individual that has a driver's license in North Carolina to help with gas prices. And the Republicans have said no. This is a party that has become a party of no. They have zero solutions to offer. They're scaring you about defund the police, and nobody's out there trying to defund the police. In fact, there have been many Democrats out there pushing for investments in our law enforcement. So we have a law enforcement system that works with the community, that keeps us safer, that invests in their mental health, in their psychological training, gives them that crisis intervention, pays them better so they can take care of not only themselves and their families. So this is all complete fear tactics. It's Sherry Beasley, it's President Biden, it's the Democrats who have provided solutions, and they're going to continue to provide solutions past 2022, past November 8th, if the American people give them another opportunity to do just that.
I think Annetta makes a good point. She says that, particularly when you were talking about some of the bills that have been introduced that just can't even get out of committee, that it doesn't impact them. And it does, and it affects their constituents, but it's always so shocking to me that people will vote against their own best interest.
Take Medicaid expansion, Yolanda.
Exactly.
Our state is one of the only states, one of the few states in the country that has refused to expand Medicaid now for years to come. Why? Because a Black man named Barack Obama, under the Affordable Care Act, brought it to the United States of America for all of us to benefit from, to cover those people in the gap. In North Carolina, we had the opportunity to cover 500,000 North Carolinians, Republicans, Democrats, unaffiliated. But instead, this General Assembly, under this Republican leadership, they have sent our hardworking tax dollars to California, to New York, to Republican states like Ohio, instead of allowing us to take care of our coworkers, our friends, and our neighbors. Medicaid expansion right there is a prime example, creating over 40,000 jobs, millions of dollars in investments. And you know what, Yolanda? We could help bolster rural hospitals where Republicans serve their constituents. But this party has said no. They finally came along this session in the state Senate. We passed Medicaid expansion for the first time, but it's still stuck in the state House. And Republican leadership in the state Assembly is saying it's probably going to have to wait till next year. Because again, folks need to understand 90% of it is paid already by the federal government. And I think almost 38 states have already expanded and gotten Medicaid. And it's been a number of Republican states that have chosen to provide access to care to their people. So that's my point right there. We have opportunities at good governments to take care of our friends, to take care of our neighbors, to take care of our citizens. We have a real opportunity to move our country forward instead of stumping on our rights, going backwards, erasing our stories. That is what the Republicans are offering. They're offering to ban books. They want to pass things like "Don't Say Gay." They're playing these fear tactics about defund the police. That's all it is, but zero solutions. And I'm excited to see what happens, what the voters thinks. And I think reproductive freedom is the other issue. You told me to talk about the other. I think access to abortion care is critical. Access to abortion care is access to healthcare, Yolanda. I'm not a woman. I don't know what it's like to have a baby. I've never had a baby. I'm a father, right? And I understand the challenges of being a parent at the end of the day, and it's such a blessing. But the reality is that is such a personal issue. And for over 50 years, we had precedent under Roe v. Wade that essentially provided protections and restrictions up to viability. That was the law of the land. And here you had a U.S. Supreme Court, because of Mitch McConnell and Republicans, they denied President Obama an opportunity to place someone on the United States Supreme Court. And the Republicans have been working for years and decades to take this court. You saw Citizens United, for example, dark money coming into politics. That's why you're seeing all those ads on TV. We can't even track where that money's coming from to attack Sherry Beasley and other folks. But the reality is that's why it's up to our states now, the state assembly, the state Supreme Court, to protect voting rights, to protect reproductive rights. And I think women especially are worked up. I think a lot of suburban women, especially where the battle lines are drawn right now, are going to be critical in this election in the next couple of days. They're going to be voting in big numbers to say, hey, no, we want to have access to healthcare. We want to have access to reproductive healthcare. They're talking about potentially banning gay marriage. They're talking about potentially banning access to birth control. These are all things that Justice Clarence Thomas talked about. So folks need to really stay vigilant. They need to stay engaged. These are critical issues that we're dealing with in the next couple of months and years.
And I think if we did not learn anything from the presidency of the former president, who controls the judiciary is what's going to control ultimately what some of the things that impact us in our daily lives. I mean, the Dobbs decision, as you said, in Clarence Thomas's opinion, he makes it very clear. We're not stopping here. It's not just about abortion. It's going to be about gay marriage. It's going to be about access to contraception. It's going to be about all of those things. And interestingly enough, not interracial marriage. Leave that there. But all of those things are up there. And if you go and look at the Republican, because it's interesting, like you see this a lot, regardless, like, okay, well, this is a problem. What are you going to do to fix it? Don't really know. We're just going to scare you half to death, but we're going to tell you we're the answer, but we're not going to tell you what we're going to do. Actually, they do. They tell you on a national level, well, what's going to happen is we're going to refuse to increase the debt ceiling, which is now going to hold the economy hostage, unless you do what we want you to do, which is cut Social Security, cut Medicaid, cut Medicare programs, all of those things that you paid all this money into. We're going to have you cut those social programs so that we can get what we need, which is additional tax cuts and all of these other things, which has shown us traditionally over and over and over again, they do nothing to stimulate the economy. They only just make rich people richer. And I think the thing that's so disturbing to me is like, why are these races so close? Like they're telling you these are the things that we're going to do. This is the plan as far as what we're going to do in terms of holding our economy hostage. And yet some of these races, if you believe it, are so close. I tell you one thing, Mujtaba, I have been a voter. Ain't nobody ever called me on any poll ever in life. Like,
Please call me.
Nobody's calling. Like, who they calling? I always want to know, who are y'all calling? I vote and y'all don't call. Y'all ain't never called me. I haven't got anything in the mail. I've had a landline for years. Even when I had a landline, nobody's ever called. So I always wonder, like, who are they asking? Like, I don't know. A side note. But if you've been polled, I'd like to know, because I don't even know any of my friends who actually ever been called for these Gallup polls and all that. But I digress. But the point is that what is going to happen, we're already seeing. And if we are not careful, those of us who always vote, we're going to vote. That's not this isn't the show for you. You're going to vote anyway. This is a show for people who are saying that it doesn't matter. They're all the same. It doesn't matter. It's not going to affect me. Yes, it is. It's going to affect your pocketbook. It's going to affect the person next to you. It's going to affect a member of your family. It's going to potentially affect your job. It's going to affect all of those things. And you have to be able to make good decisions. And you just can't afford to sit this election out. So I'm going to give you the last word because I want to wrap this up in about 5 minutes or so. But what would you say to voters now? Obviously, you're on the ballot. But what would you say to voters now? Like, what in general, if you could sum it up, what truly is at stake here?
Everything. Everything's at stake, Yolanda. And people of everything from our federal government for these U.S. Senate races down to our local district court races, for example, everything is on the line. And folks need to wake up. They need to consistently stay involved in elections. Again, I said elections happen every single year. Not every 4 years, not every 2 years, but every single year. And as we as citizens, we have an opportunity to hold our elected officials accountable, at the same time to make sure that we have a representative democracy and people who are looking out for us instead of working against us. And that's the opportunity we have right now with 6 days to go before Election Day, is to elect Sherry Beasley to protect that razor thin margin, to elect Justice Ervin and Lucy Inman to the state Supreme Court. Absolutely critical. If there's 2 names that you need to remember when you go into that voting booth, it needs to be Sam Ervin and Lucy Inman for the state Supreme Court, because that's going to affect voting rights. That's going to affect reproductive rights potentially for years and decades to come. When it comes to the state legislative races, so many competitive ones, and that path to that supermajority, again, like I said, goes through Mecklenburg County. It goes through Wake County. So we've got some critical races here. And so many other critical issues that we're working towards. We got to be able to give people economic opportunities. We've got to be able to build people instead of building prisons in our state and country. We've got to be able to protect our democracy. I genuinely believe that democracy dies when registered voters don't vote and they decide to stay home. So if you have friends, family, neighbors, whoever they are, take 2, 3, 4 people to get out there and vote today, because it's going to make a difference. Sherry Beasley, 401 votes. 401 votes is what happened, is what it had taken for her to win that last election. So we have a real opportunity here to move forward. Yolanda, I think I lost you.
There we go. I'm telling you, the gremlin tried to pop back in again. We're good though, but I could not have said it better. That is so crucial for us to be able to keep in mind. I'm going to, like I said, post this again. I'm gonna post this in the comments. But for those of you who are in Mecklenburg County, grab yourself a blue ballot. You can go to any early voting location that is close to you. The lines aren't long. It's steady in most places. But you got a number of locations for anywhere from Bank of America Stadium to most of your local libraries. There's one on UNCC's campus. There's from North Charlotte to South Charlotte, East and West Charlotte, and everywhere in between. Early voting is from 8 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. So you have Thursday and Friday until 7:30. Saturday, you have until 3 p.m. If you vote on election day, it has to be in your precinct. So if you don't make it on Saturday, then you're going to definitely have to make sure that you have a plan on Tuesday. And voting on election day is from 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. Make sure that you get your ballot from mecbo.org if you want to take a look at your sample ballot in advance. But it's going to be so incredibly important that you don't sit this one out. You cannot afford to sit this one out. There's so much on the line from what our state politics looks like as Senator Mohammed said, anything everywhere from Medicaid and Medicare expansion to voting rights to reproductive rights to education. Even our local races for school board are also super important because of underperforming schools and what we need to do to be able to get that back on track. Our sheriff's race is important in terms of making sure that people who are accused of a crime, let's be clear on that, that people who are accused of a crime in our courthouses are run effectively. The clerk of courts position is up there. Elisa Changari is running unopposed. Board of County Commissioners, they're all on your ballot from at large to your individual district races. And then further up the ballot in terms of your district court judges, obviously your state house, your state senate, Top of the ticket, Sherry Beasley. District 12, Alma Adams. District 14, Jeff Jackson. Lucy Inman, Sam Irvin, and all of your Democratic Court of Appeals judges, please, please do not sit this one out. Please make sure that you get out and vote. Share this particular podcast, because the replay will be available just as soon as we're done. iwillvote.com is where you can also set up your voting plan. Senator Mohammed, it's always a pleasure. It is always a pleasure. And I personally want to thank you for all the work that I know you do in the state Senate. Even when it's difficult facing what the numbers look like there, you are always consistent. You've done an amazing job in pushing through and getting bills done and getting the real work done with Raise the Age and so many others. And I just appreciate you, because that's not always the case with people who end up getting in that seat, and you actually go in and do the work. So I salute you and appreciate you. So, all right, y'all know what to do. Sexy people, y'all need to get this done. Show me your sticker. That's going to be the hashtag. Show me your sticker. That's going to be the hashtag, y'all. Make sure you post your voting pictures and get people out there, and let's make this be one of the more successful elections, to be able to send a message that we're not going backwards. We're moving forwards. Thank you so much, Senator.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, y'all have a good night, and hope to see most of you all mañana. All right, y'all have a good evening.